This is our 6th meeting. Obviously, kind of postponed / canceled the last one. I just, as I've expressed this, I got enough kind of comments from the community side of the fence who said, hey, I've got other things going on, and I recognized that I wasn't getting anybody from the district who was going to show up just because of the new start school schedule. So, went ahead and postponed that, and it is what it is. We're going to pick up and move forward. Today we're going to focus on kind of a couple areas of kind of rebuilding the story, kind of recollecting our thoughts, recollecting our organization so that we can move forward and progress towards what is our charge number 1. Anybody want to say who they are for the first time? Who hasn't been here before? You've never been here.
Not since you guys started meeting.
All right, so if you're new, go ahead and say hello and just give us the 1-minute thumbnail sketch of who you are, how you're involved in the district, family history as far as students, and whatnot.
So my name is Eva Less. I'm the principal of Summit View Elementary. I'm highly involved with this facility need. I have a 6th grader and a 9th grader in the district who also are in schools, well, the 9th graders, not the 6th graders, in need of some updating and modification.
Jeff Jamison, athletic director, assistant principal at the high school. I've got a graduate of West Valley, I've got a senior and a sophomore. Just a longtime community member and supporter, and that's why I'm here.
Oh, sorry. Russ Tillman, principal of the Little campus. I have 2 children that graduated from West Valley.
Lori Barber, 4th grade Apple Valley. 2 kids that graduated and Cooper's in, I'm here because England is in Apple Valley.
And Mrs. Barber has had Addison last year and has one right now. So she's an important teacher in our life. Okay. So we obviously developed the facilities committee with the concept of a mixture of district staff and community members who together could come together and provide kind of a regrounding of the purpose and the need of the district, why we're doing what we're doing, develop the information independently or as kind of as an independent team so that we can better inform our school district itself, kind of from an administration perspective, but more importantly, our community as a whole as to what we need in order to meet the basic educational expectations for buildings and facilities in our district, and provide our students the opportunity to compete on the world's stage. So I don't think, unfortunately, that we're going to get Amazon's new $5 billion campus, but we do see the Yakima throwing that. So our committee mission statement is absolutely focused around that. We're a team and we're going to develop solutions. Charge number 1 on the list is all about elementary school boundaries, and so that's been our principal kind of first focus is this question of we've got a lot of elementary school kids. Where are they now? How do we balance out our buildings? How do we get them into places where we can not have a building like Apple Valley or Summit View that's really crunched for staff and frankly even Cottonwood crunched for space in order to have students in there? How do we balance out some of these needs? And so that's been one of the goals. So this is your fresh, I believe, fresh new data that I got today. Last year we had 1,897 kids in our K through 4, and apparently we're up 84 students so far today. So just kind of an interesting application, and this hits every building. We're up 14 kids at Atana. We're up 13 kids at Apple Valley. We're up 14 kids at Cottonwood. Mountain View's gained 13. Just kind of across the board, we're getting kind of a teens level of increase in every one of our buildings. I didn't break this down. Obviously, all those charts exist, and one of our elements in the report that we finalize is going to have this kind of this building use population. But just an interesting breakdown, kind of an update on where we have kids.
Can we make a commentary?
Sure.
I know, and because I know being in the past meetings with some of our community members, there's a dialogue about, there's a difference between a class size and a building being overloaded. Even I would talk about this. There are low numbers in our class sizes, especially within our building. And so someone says, so explain to me how you're overloaded. They're two totally different things. Our class sizes are a little bit lower. That's also a contractual piece that our teacher's contract asks for that. But for us specifically, we were built as a 2-track school. That means there were only supposed to be 2 classes per grade level. So you'll notice when we have 4 at 2 grade levels and then 3, that is how we are overloaded based on how we are built. And I know that that's applicable, maybe Eva would speak to that. So some people look at that and say, you only have 17 in a class. Totally understand that. But as how many classes we have are too many for how our buildings are built. Just thought that might be a
Plus-
good clarification on that.
That's good, but plus 67 kindergartners, the class size is 21 according to the contract. So if you have 3 classes, that's 63. So if you didn't have that 4th section, you're gonna be over anyway.
Look at Cottonwood's
And
Kinders.
same with-
Yeah, Cottonwood's Kinders.
And yeah, and same with 1st grade, so.
Tandem too, I think, because weren't you typically a 2-track? Oh, you were 3.
3 to 4 is,
Okay.
So just to put that in perspective again,
Yeah, thank you.
and this is one of the things that I'm going to meet both with, so one of the things that I think also critically builds on Heidi's comment is these are my words, and probably a little bit inaccurate. We have the kind of typical classroom model, but now we have all of these additional building needs. We have a self-contained classroom that maybe requires a different kind of space or a different access limitation. We've got more need for one-on-one space or small group teaching spaces. You know, the introduction of computer labs. Apple Valley, some of you, they weren't built with the concept of a computer lab, and so we've taken what was originally a classroom education kind of standard core class, and we've had to repurpose that in order to meet the needs. And so when we look at this overall balance, when we talk about a 2-track building, in order to meet a K through 4, that means the building needs to have 8 classrooms simply to meet that purpose, plus all of these other additional uses and needs. And so that's one of the balances that we have to come back to and understand. And one of the concepts that Chris and I were talking about was this building specifically. Is this building got to a point in design and construction where they recognized that they were going to need additional space for forthcoming classes. And so the school district invested some of the reserves in building these last 6 classrooms. That provides all kinds of flexibility that we wouldn't otherwise see. And so even in a 2-track classroom or a 3-track classroom, we may need an extra classroom of flexible space that one year doesn't have this absolute classroom use, but within the next year, because we've got a population of kids that spike, we're going to need to have that space. So kind of an interesting balance is we don't build buildings specifically to the today need. We try to envision that overall long-term need of the buildings. Okay. So that's just our current numbers. Published as of today. So you're 84 kids up in your grade schools over last year, or last year end of year.
And just to mention, enrollment typically, historically at Summit View, goes up from the September count to the June count. And I think the rest of the elementaries tend to see that as well.
Okay, so just again, current numbers. Sorry, last point to build on Heidi's comment is recall that one of those Apple Valley kindergarten classrooms is team teaching in kind of a space and a half. So there's also some of those kinds of creative space uses that our buildings could be used too.
I just had to have my library in house.
Yeah. Pretty cool.
Not cool.
That's why you need Chromebooks.
'Cause there's no place now at all for like my OT, Braille instruction, one-on-one. They're in the hallway. There's nothing. No meeting space, school board, we're gonna meet on in the gym probably. So next year when I have to go to first grade, and then pending enrollment numbers for kinder, am I gonna wait, have to wait till the end of August to create that fourth class again, or just plan on it? What do I do? I know, I'm just saying, it's a real deal, so if you say some of you's not overcrowded, it is.
Well, and I guess one of the old adages has been that Mountain View's underpopulated. And we do, I believe, have more available classrooms, but we've done a pretty good job of that, of getting up to our target numbers for student use. Okay, two other things. So we've had some conversations. Again, this 2-page handout. These were the previous questions. So these were previous questions that the administration answered in the midst of the elementary boundary conversation. So I just want to bring this up. I don't know who has it, who's read it, but it also just speaks to some of the building use. It answers some of the more critical questions that we've talked about, the number of portables, et cetera. So it's just a good source to have. Who wants to talk about the survey? All right, I still have for sale 7 copies of the paper survey if anybody wants one. So again, Citizens for Better Schools put this out there. The goal was to provide a separation from the district. The goal was to go out and seek kind of responses from as many community members as we could. And at the end of the day, I closed this with about 565 responses. Robin and I were talking, some of the questions are kind of potentially carry their own bias. One of the questions, for instance, is how would you like to learn more about what's going on in the district? And the number one answer is email, which ironically is how we communicated the survey out to most people. So, not as though the people who would typically prefer to see the paper necessarily responded to that, responded to the survey at all. So, you know, interestingly, my gut instinct is the survey also has some bias towards did you fully understand the projects? Did you understand what the district was asking for? There are absolutely a certain number of people out there that said, yes, I understand, and I still chose not to support the bond. And yet, that doesn't probably seem like the right answer, is there's probably a large portion of our community that doesn't understand fully what we're going on with the bond. So some of those questions are good and help to build in kind of just a 20/20 hindsight kind of perspective, but they are what they are. As I noted in the email, I did eliminate a couple comments just because I felt like they were unnecessarily specific in referencing a couple district staff members, and so I just got rid of those. So those are the big black boxes. If somebody feels like they really want to know, I'll tell them later. Okay? So let's go ahead and begin with question 5. Of the following concerns, which do you believe is of greatest concern when it comes to the school facilities? So I guess I'll just ask the question in regards to this, question 5. Is anybody surprised by the answers? Okay. Anybody have some level of disagreement?
Well, there's more than 100% on there, so I assume that it was a single flag.
Absolutely mark more than that. Yeah, you can mark more than one. Okay. All right, so we all recognize that overcrowded classrooms, safety and security, age and condition of the buildings are critical. All of these concern me, probably hit those 3 mostly. We recognize that people are generally not concerned about potential new students, and that people are generally not concerned about community use in our school spaces. And I just bring that back to, gymnasiums. Now, again, I think there's probably a portion of our community that find gymnasium spaces, by example, to be exceptionally valuable. What?
Swimming pool space.
Swimming pool space. The mythical swimming pool. Yes. Okay. All right, well, that was an easy one. I would like to jump now to question number 8. Okay, question number 8. How could the district improve on its communications?
I love the donation one.
Yes.
Miracle Network and doing some kind of like a GoFundMe.
There were a couple of those that was interesting.
Yeah,
That
interesting.
was very interesting. I like the one that suggests that we hold a bunch of fundraisers, which is a different way of our community to pay for our own schools. Other ones that people found I guess, less, how do I phrase that? There you go. Your phone looks really small. My big 3, and I guess some of the things that we talked about before, communication, clarity in financial preparations and presentations, the demonstration of where we're spending our dollars. So it feels more informational. So those were, I guess, the kind of big things that I took away from it. And I just tend to highlight a lot of copies. I thought there were some interesting comments, like an app per school.
Yeah.
There's some interesting technology options that maybe from a district perspective would be interesting.
Or at least that if you can subscribe to Google Calendars, that you can sign up for notices or anything like that.
But it does run the gamut from this one of just keep mailer to an app. So you have a massive, wide variety of ways of communication.
Okay. So was this a helpful question? Okay, moving on. Question 9. How would you feel more, what would help you feel more positive about investing in schools? Answer all. You're looking at number 5 already, aren't you?
No, I was laughing at the most verbose response that we need to be clear and concise.
So as I've mentioned before, I think that this positive feeling is going to be one that we're going to struggle with in the next 6 to 18 months, just as our state schools taxes start to change and we start to have elements about what those are. So I think from a community perspective, we're going to need to see how other districts are starting to handle that and then craft our own informational message that helps people understand how their dollars are being used. Does anybody see anything in here that would say that these questions and answers shouldn't be publicly available? Anybody want to wordsmith any more of these answers? Blackout areas.
So I noticed a couple of them that were calling people out by name. That
Okay.
would be appropriate to at least black out the name.
Okay. I know you guys all read this. We face an uphill battle with blue wall syndrome, moldy blue wall syndrome, I guess, also.
And wasn't that, wasn't that a grant?
I don't know if they spent any of our dollars on that. They might have. I don't know. There's always two perspectives on it. One, the side that says it's a waste of money, and the other side that says we need to have something that differentiates our building, that makes it unique, that provides architectural interest and focus and pride and all those other kinds of things. So it's an interesting element because there's a response back from the principal at Mike, who describes the blue wall as being a core focus of who they are now. And so you have this community aspect that looks at it as a waste, and yet you have a building that looks at it with a different kind of value. And I think an architect would tell you they're building it towards the people in the building, not the people who drive by the street. Right? They're focused on space use for the students and for the teachers.
But when people driving by on the street are the ones paying for it, they get upset if they're not happy with them. So that's the issue with it. That's why it's the issue that it is.
There's a lot of talk and complaints from within that building as well too, that trickles out,
Yeah.
so.
I think there's another common theme in here, which we faced this last time too, about what is the end result? Seeing a model or seeing the plans. I know that was much better in the second go around, but that was definitely in this again about where is our money going and what will it look like?
Okay.
Oh yeah, about the signs being bright colored yellow. That was in there, so I don't know, maybe that was the same person answering every time. But that was in there quite a bit.
Okay.
Is there a way to like categorize these responses so that you can see kind of like threads or themes in the thinking, or do you, I mean, it's kind of like with the bar graphs out there to show percentages of where people were going.
Steve, there are programs, there are qualitative data programs that triangulate the data and pull certain keywords and group those keywords into answers.
I'm seeing some
It's
things
pretty,
that.
yeah. It does kind of sort out your,
Yeah. It just comes back to, as I understand using those, you kind of have to differentiate those keywords. So I have to say Eisenhower blue and wall, at which point we'll triangulate those kinds of responses.
I mean, I see, there's some negative responses, but then there are also a lot of positive ones here too, and I think sometimes the less attractive remarks get overshadowed or overshadow some of the more positive things too. So I don't know. I like to see kind of disaggregating.
Okay. See what I can do. Question 12 is kind of our last one in this group. And this was the always helpful, what else should we know question. I think I must have given up highlighting my own copy here. Can we sell that property on Atana for $1 million? Can we sell that property on Atana for $1 million?
Which piece of property, the one that out garage is?
The bus garage. Like, that doesn't seem,
I don't, it's pretty positive. Like, thoughts.
With the swimming pool, long bounds out.
And the Perry Tech is doing the HVAC.
Yeah, the HVAC, I like that.
Everybody guys going to school to do HVAC.
Well, in the seniors, it's paid for, we're done.
I'm not sure if that's actually legal. I know that Perry Tech does work on their own buildings,
It's not.
but I don't think
But
it's
it's
actually.
No.
certified, yeah.
You can't use free labor for anything that's, it's the same thing with unpaid internships. You can't use free labor for anything that's market bearing that somebody gets paid to do. So the LNI restricts that, that's a state restriction. So that wouldn't be legal at all.
Okay. Next question to build on this. What are the next 5 questions we should ask that help you as a member of the facilities committee, or that you think would be valuable as an overall member of the community?
What would you vote yes for?
What will you support?
And have like a list of some options and have A, B, C, and what, A and B, A, C, B and C, all of the above, you know what I mean, something like that. What would you vote yes for?
What about, have you visited any of the sites that need to be remodeled or rebuilt?
Check all that apply and this was the buildings.
I like Mike's, what would you vote for, but I'd almost leave it wide open initially. Just, what would you support?
Different ideas or
Yeah.
something, yeah.
Or maybe have both that and one of those check marks, but I'd be curious to see, is there, because you might get nothing.
How about just kind of a which building represents the biggest need? Something open-ended like that, some kind of building list. Any other
We
thoughts?
should ask them, would they rather see new construction or remodeling? Or tear down and rebuild?
So my previous district, we tried to pass our high school several times, and it didn't go, and there was a group that was voting no. And finally, they went to that group and said, what do we have to do to get a yes? And the response was, don't raise our taxes. And so they figured out the money difference, that was the budget, it passed the next time. So I don't know if there's an active group. I mean, we had the streets lined with vote no for schools, right next to the vote yes for schools. And so they found those people and just said, what do we have to do to make it work? So I don't know if there's an active group.
We don't have an active visible no campaign, see, that's because that's good to go to, see.
Does anybody know of any super secret dark red pages or against West Valley Schools?
You should ask Walmart reader, they might know.
What do you?
I just find it frustrating that the people who are vocal about the no usually are the most uninformed. And so I don't know how we get over that hurdle when we have so much information out there. Because people will come back to me and they'll say, well, this, and this, and I was like, no. I mean, even parents and some of you were like, well, we've heard this. I'm like, come and talk to me next time, please.
I think, Viva, that might be the problem. The people that we think are informed, maybe our staff and our families are not as informed as they need to be.
I'm sorry. Have we ever had, as part of a bond or levy campaign, have we ever gone to individual?
Yeah, everyone.
Okay, all right.
Because if you can't get the people standing in line at the store who work for the district to know enough about it,
Right.
and somebody says, hey, what's the deal? That's not good. So we try to inform everybody. One of the, I know we can always
But I
do
would say
better.
we could do a better job,
Sure.
because in my position, I'm pretty informed, and I'm in a lot of meetings, and I'm not sure, even in my position, that I was educated enough on the bond and levies to be a convincing voice.
Yeah. So 2 questions I thought, Ryan, that were really critical were question 1 and question 2. It's nice to see that 82, almost 83% of the people understood the request, understood the bond request, but only, and it's an amazing number, isn't that an amazing number? 55.5% thought it was a fiscally responsible plan. So in other words, everybody understood the plan, but not even, just barely half, 55%, which is about what we got, thought it was fiscally responsible. So,
But again, of those who answered the survey, because then you have to wonder,
yeah.
there's probably a lot of those no's out there that did not reply, unfortunately.
Well, and I think one of those yeses was also the same person that said it was $4 million to build new elementary school. And clearly a little off base.
That's a one-room school.
There's a comment right about the strategic plan, which is obviously what you're doing, but that also was a lot of it. People don't know what's coming down, because if it's a couple of schools now, well then what about, and that's where that strategic plan, that's, I don't know if that's big Kennewick strategy, is you can see 10 years down the road where they are going next. So hopefully that's what you're doing is gonna help with that.
So the precincts, voting precincts that are traditionally consistently negative. And they're not just a little bit negative. They're 80%, And so finding a way to engage with some of those areas and ask the question, what would it take? Might be.
Would it be
You know the areas.
beneficial? Would it be beneficial for community meetings to be held at the Harmon Center just to get a pulse of that demographic, because they're one of the largest voting demographics and have
We were there 3 times.
no investment, so.
3 or 4 times.
Speaking of demographics though, Mark, do you have that demographic data on the responses? Income level, community, I read through a lot of the responses and you can kind of tell that financial perception varies greatly. Like if I'm living on 30 grand a year, or 24 grand a year, that's a lot of money versus, and I'm kind of curious what that demographic and what that income level and even education level, because a lot of the most, I want to say this in the most tactful way possible, but the most viscerally negative responses were definitely grammatically challenged. You know?
Just saying, Lois.
What?
Maybe type it on there. So
That could be.
correct it.
So I'm kind of curious what the demographic is on it.
Well, I can, since I'm the outsider here, from the outside, I've only been here less than 2 years, retired, from my perspective coming into the district and seeing a bond with that much money, when I'm looking at how much it's going to affect my taxes as a retired person, that was one of the issues, and I thought there was a lot of extra fluff. It's been brought up before by, and I'm terrible with names of gentlemen here, that there was an effort to try to console everybody possible that wanted something out of this levy or bond issue. You're trying to please everybody, and you can't do that. And I think they agreed at the school board meeting that was maybe not the best way, the best approach. So from somebody coming from one school district to another one, now retired, and looking at how much that was going to increase my taxes, approximately 25% more per year on my taxes. That's a big bite. I don't get a raise every year. Social Security doesn't give you raises. I get a 1% raise from my pension. That isn't going to cover that kind of a percentage. I'm also looking at, like most retired people, at least the ones that I know, we're also looking at the economics of the entire country and what's coming on. And now just recently, this is going to hurt us bad. We just got hit with a big storm in Texas. You got another one coming, going to hit Florida. If you don't think that your home insurance is not going to go up this next year, your car insurance is not going to go up, these are all costs that a retired person is going to look and go, oh crap. And then we're going to turn around and you wanted this big $81 million levy. Granted, we didn't have those things back then, but these are some of the aspects that a lot of your retired people, and I understand we've got like 60% retired people in the district, these are things that we're going to be looking at to replace schools. I think, personal opinion only, is we need to focus on what needs to be replaced first, what is it going to cost, and can we come up with a strategic plan 10, 15 years, so as we pay off the bonds for the high school, we can supplement them in with other bond issues for maintenance or remodel where we can remodel. There's 2 schools I don't think you can remodel. Summit View and Apple Valley. I think I'll run the bulldozer because I know how to run a bulldozer. I'll take care of those. I'll run through
They
those.
fight for who gets on that bulldozer.
But I've heard here in all these meetings lots of talk about how we're going to put kids here, there, and everywhere. And my mind keeps focusing on how can we somehow come up with the money to get the schools that need to be replaced first replaced without putting a major strain on the young family that's making $30,000 a year and he's got a car payment and insurance costs and buying school stuff for his kids and clothing, and they look at their taxes annually going up $500-600, they're going to be kind of in a shock mode. Okay, I can kind of recover a little bit. I've done pretty well, so I'm not panicking financially as a retired person, but I still have to look at the long run. I've only got X to work with the rest of my life. So these are some things that we got to start thinking about now because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. We do need to get some schools replaced, but somehow we can't overwhelm us with major tax increases to try to get everything done in the next 2 years. And that last plan, I believe, hit me with, we're trying to do all this all at once and irregardless of what it's going to cost, and we still had, at the time, I had no idea how many bonds we got going out there. At the school board meeting I went to in February, nobody could tell me. How much money did the school board have, or not the school board, but how much are the taxpayers on the hook for everything? I didn't know that.
One bond.
One bond, okay. Nobody could tell me that, what it was though.
2026, high school.
And if you were there in February, you couldn't tell me, because nobody on that board could tell me what I asked. How many bonds, how much is out there, how much are we on the hook for?
Yeah.
Nobody told me at that meeting.
I don't know what the-
School board meetings are always awkward because they're not allowed to talk to us as community members.
So
They're just allowed to
anyway,
complain.
this is a lot of information that maybe a lot of people don't know. They don't know what they're on the hook for right now and for when. So now I know, because through this committee, I found out that, you know, we're on the hook for so much until,
Nine more years.
yeah, 9 more years, until 2025.
26,
26.
yeah.
So, and then we're gonna add more onto it. And then how many more years was that gonna be?
20.
You see that? I asked
They're
that,
usually 20-year bonds, yeah.
and I asked that question in February and got no answer. How long would it take to pay the failed levy for? Nobody gave me an answer.
Field bond.
What, you were at the board meeting? I'm
I
trying
was
to
at
see
the
if I
board
was
meeting in
there.
February. That's
I'm trying
why
to
I
see if I
wanted to
was
get
there.
involved.
'Cause yeah.
And I have a reason for that, personal reason for it, because my father-in-law was on the school board for 25 years until he died. He's been gone now for 30 or 20 years, so. So that's kind of another reason why I have a little, my wife graduated from here. My brother-in-law is the football coach here. You know, so I have a little bit of interest, family interest in stuff. And even though I'm an outsider, but my family, my married family is from here, so
If it was,
anyway.
yeah, if it was the 13th, I was in Olympia during the legislative session, so if that was the one, so, because, yeah, wish I would have been there.
I think, I agree with what you're saying, and my husband's retired, and I'm headed that direction, and we've got 2 kids in college, you know, so we're like, oh my God,
Yeah,
you know, financially, but, and across from, about a block away from our house, we live in West Valley and Apple Valley neighborhood, and across from our house, we just tore down an orchard and everything's, you know, their building. There's a big disconnect, I think, between the people who are adamant about it, about the need, about, you know, I can tell you every second of my day at Apple Valley why we need a new school. But I don't, you know, like my husband might not feel the same thing except for what he knows with me coming home. And I think there's a disconnect between us and the people who are not involved in education that don't have that information. Now, it's our problem to get that out there, and we don't know. Obviously, successfully, we don't know how to get that out there. We tried so hard with this last meeting, or with this last bond measure. And that's what we need. We need more people like you who are asking us those questions and saying, you know, where am I going to come up with $500 extra? I'm not going to be able to do that because I can't either, you know, but I see what's happening. I don't want my property value to go down. I don't want the kids who are coming in to be suffering from, you know, like our school education level is going to go down eventually with these things that are happening, unless we keep it at an even keel. And right now, because I mean, like my classroom today was smokier than it was outside. And you could walk into my classroom and you could say, wow, it's sure smoky in here. We should like ban this classroom. Those are just like one of a million things that happen every day. But we're having a hard time making that, bridging that gap between the people who know it and the people who don't. And the fluff that you're talking about, I agree with you. It's got to be paired. It's got to be something that is in one track and you can see exactly what's going to happen. because we've got so much information for people to get. And at the board meetings, and I was at 90% of them, we don't get all that much attendance unless someone has a specific need or some kind of complaint or gripe or whatever that they want to have satisfied, but we don't get a lot of attendance. And so we need to bridge that gap, whether it's technological, I don't know, because I don't know that that's necessarily the target group we're looking at. So
Well, we
we
need-
need your voice.
Like I say, the thing that I think was the main reason for the defeat was there was too much being asked for. We need to focus on the most critical aspects that we need to fix. And right now, from what I see, have seen, is the two elementaries are the ones that need. Now, we've got a couple potential other schools that we might be able to remodel a little bit, but we got to do it in steps. And I think if we're going to do like trying to get rid of the two oldest schools and get two much better, a little bit larger, so they have some growth capacity, but within a reasonable amount of time, as far as the length of the bond, instead of maybe a 20-year bond, maybe a 15 or a 12-year bond. We'll see how the economy goes and building goes, and maybe in another 5 years, then we relook and say, okay, well, maybe we can come up with a smaller bond to add on top of that, that's maybe a 5 or a 10-year bond to do something with the junior high school, or, maintenance stuff. And the thing to trying to do, you're gonna build two brand new schools, you're gonna do all this remodel work and all this stuff on a courtyard at the junior high school. I grew up, I never had a courtyard, and I did just fine. To me, it was a waste of money.
We're getting
They're
rid of
Getting rid of the courtyard, they're building.
Yeah, well, they
Classrooms
wanted,
in there.
good.
That was
What do
part
you
of-
need one for?
I
No,
wasn't
there was
here
in
when it
that
was
bond,
built.
you were gonna replace it with another courtyard.
No, we
No,
weren't, we
they
were
were
putting
putting
8 classrooms in there to make it go to 1,200 students. We're getting rid of the courtyard.
That's not what I read in the pamphlet that came in the mail, was on the list there, was to add a new courtyard. You were gonna add space for storage there.
Yeah.
And when I went through the junior high school, I said, there's your storage issue right there, that whole center courtyard that's useless, because nobody can get to it unless you go through a classroom, because you're using the only double door access from the hallway as a storage area. So you take that whole area in the courtyard and you turn that into 3 levels. There's all your storage issues. You're in the center of the building and all your storage would have been there.
It was gonna be 8 classrooms there, and then 6 or 8 more out between the building and the gym.
But there was also, you wanted more storage space,
Had needed that, yeah.
okay? You can buy vans really cheap for storage. Containers. They work real good for storage. People make homes out of them. Instead of spending, I forget exactly what it was on that flyer, but it was a horrendous amount of money for storage that I thought was absolutely ridiculous. Those are the things that killed it. Focus on the primary things that we need now. That's 2 elementary schools.
Yeah, I don't
That's what needs to
disagree,
be
yeah.
focused on. Just about bet you we could get that passed.
I think there is a major communication problem, obviously, and I had someone say to me, in fact, when my son was, now 16-year-old, was in preschool, that all you had to do you thought Apple Valley didn't need to be replaced, you just needed to go into it. We weren't even living in Yakima, in West Valley at the time, we were in Yakima schools. And she was right. Much later, my son went to West Valley, and I don't know how you do that. If you can get people, I agree, I think, take things bit by bit. I would concentrate on West Valley, on Apple Valley, but that's debatable. And I don't know, brochures with pictures. I mean, you go into one of those classrooms and it's pretty obvious that there's a big problem.
So I've got a question for both of you, because I've got my head gets spinning here, because I respect the cost.
So is mine.
Things like that. But as somebody within the system, I'm looking at, Apple Valley, some of you to try and, I grew up here, Mountain View before the junior high was built, right, Mr. Prescott? That's correct. And then the only bond we've passed since I've been here as administrator in the last 14 years is the high school. And we've been trying to pass the Summit View and Apple Valley for many years. And as we're trying to pass these things, these other buildings become more and more of a concern and an issue. And so all of a sudden you're looking at, yeah, we need this, but geez, we've got a major capacity and technology hole there at the junior high. Well, then, because I was here when we built Cottonwood and we built in the middle school, and that's been 25 years ago. And so all of a sudden, technology needs these other needs. And so as we're trying to get this done over here, because we tried just Napa Valley and just some of you, it was killed. I mean, it wasn't killed just a little bit. It was slapped down very hard. And so these other buildings now are finding themselves falling into degrees of disrepair, and they need, whether it's, we can have an argument about whether or not you need $50 million into the junior high and what exactly gets done, but there's repairs in these other buildings that also are needed. So how do we go about addressing both those immediate concerns, but then we get these ongoing needs that become paramount also. And so how do you get that? Because that was part of what this was trying to address previously, was the 2 elementaries and these things that are happening at the junior high, which hasn't been touched since '79. And so how do we get the community? How do we take care of, how do we take care of this? I guess that's my question, is that we can't do, as we're trying to do this, these other things are becoming, up to the top. How do we address them? How do we get the community to buy, not just, an Apple Valley, some of you, but hey, we got a junior high that's got panels now that are starting to fall down, that has electrical, but can't keep up with the needs, that has capacity issues that we're not able to keep up with. I mean, how do we mitigate these things what we're trying to do? Sorry to ramble.
No,
I think that's the question.
But we still have, it hasn't worked trying to get everything all at once.
And it didn't work trying to get just the 2.
Well, maybe
So,
again, it's a communications issue
Just
there.
the 2 though were ran in 2008, just after the housing crash. So when nothing was passed that year.
I don't know, but I think the concept is one of catch-up. We are
Right.
falling behind, and how do we efficiently and responsibly catch up?
But get the people on board so they can see it, and also have a package that they can afford. I mean, because what he's saying, and like many people here, my parents are in the community and they're on fixed incomes, and we have a lot of retired teachers that I'm still somewhat connected with a little bit, and that being able to say, can you afford this? That's gonna be a tough sell, and so how do you package that? I get that, it's just coming answer on this.
Well, ultimately, I think that's collectively the question we need to be able to answer. Is what's the steps in the process by which we catch up? So that's kind of objective number 3, which is your 10-year plan, is to lay out how you're gonna do it. And I recognize both of the models, and frankly, I don't know which is gonna work. The Kennewick model, it almost literally was sprinkled in enough from every part of our community that everybody has a reason to support it.
But they also have 3 high schools.
Absolutely, very big community, absolutely.
But if you do research on, you can just Google bonds passing around, there is that premise of giving something to everyone. A couple other districts I read about were in our same shoes, and they finally went to, okay, so everybody gets an electronic reader board. Everybody got, I'm making these up, don't use them as, an added parking lot, and that is what did it, because it did go back to giving each, like Richard said, community area something, And so some of these districts found that helped. And they were simple things as an electronic reader board, or it was safety, lighting, security doors, keep card passes, some of those just smaller scale pieces that
Things that would raise it
allowed.
at maybe $1 million or $2 million,
Yeah.
not
Right, they
1
were,
million.
exactly. It wasn't a wing, but it was, yeah. So that's another idea.
Redo the football.
No, it wasn't a football.
Oh, like a pass.
A new slide. It was some playground equipment. I mean, there were some of those very small, scale things, but yet helped the school to feel, their community got something too.
The other thing I think is very difficult for us, being West Valley people, compared to other districts, the population compared to the size of the schools and the cost to build the schools is probably per household a little more expensive than a bigger area. In Snohomish School District, where I was last at, we had a couple high schools. We were scattered over quite a big area. But we also had a lot bigger population. So the cost for a building or whatever, for a 500 student school spread out over the voting population or the district was a lot bigger, less of an impact on the individual family than it seems to be here. So that's another issue, kind of an uphill battle that I'm kind of coming to grips with, of learning over here. The school district is smaller than what I was used to, and I grew up in Seattle School District, so you can imagine how many households there are there. So everything wasn't as big of a deal per household for every time when we had levies, because it didn't affect my parents' taxes that much. So they almost always passed. But here we have fewer households, construction costs is construction costs, I don't care where you are. So much per square foot, but when you put it against 50,000 people compared to 20,000 people, it's going to affect the 20,000 people a lot more financially. And that's another burden that we have to somehow try to compromise and come up with some plan to overcome that.
The bigger cost, I don't think, is the people, it's the type of properties. We don't have a lot of commercial or industrial property. Like Everett School District's the best funded in the state because Bowen Field is carrying most of that tax burden. Or Seattle, and then 40% of Seattle residents go to private school, which means they only have to educate 60% of their students because 40% are utilized in public schools. And then the tax burden is being carried by a skyscraper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll shut up.
It's fine. I think it's important questions to ask, and it's better to ask those early so we can all consider the answers and how best to bring our suggestions to the group. So I know that I wrote down a few comments to me, for myself. I think the next time we go for a levy or a bond, I think will be a good idea to equip every staff member with a stack of 20 cards that says, these are the 10 bullet points and the 3 bullet points about this levy or this bond. What was it for? Those kinds of additional communication tools so that we can help to inform people and have some kind of consistency in our message. We've talked about the type of community members that we need to hit. We need to get people that want to see stuff in the mail. We want to hit the community members that aren't going to be in an electronic media kind of environment. So I think there's a lot of tools that come out of that delivery process. So I sent out a couple emails this week to the school district, and I asked for just a little bit of information. And I've touched base with a couple of the principals on that. My intent is to go back and get all of the data on every classroom use for the past 5 years, so that we can all see how our buildings are being used. Okay? So we're going to try to build that for every elementary school, for the mid-campus, and for the high campus. We're going to go back and understand how many students we've had, and essentially how those students have progressed through our buildings. We're gonna go back and we're gonna try to tie down home addresses in school districts or school assignment for every one of our students in the district. And we're gonna go back on the other comment that I really pulled out of this, which is again, back to that funding and what happened to the dollars from the high school bond. So I've asked that the school board work on a detailed, this is the incoming and this is the outgoing summary on all those dollars, so that frankly, we can answer that question once and for all. That we can have a single go-to reference that everybody understands about how the dollars were generated and how they were spent. Okay, so those are the kind of the work tasks that we have in order to hopefully pull together enough data so that you guys can feel informed and can make some decisions. Ultimately, again, our plan and the recommendation that we come back is going to be an interesting balance between what can we realistically do right now in order to address needs versus what are the longer term solutions. So that's the balance we have, because while we talk about construction bonds and how we think we could package those or select or modify that kind of approach in order to pass a bond, I don't know that a bond is something that the school board is going to be interested in considering, in February or beyond that. So we have to understand the reasons and provide that argument as to why we think it's an appropriate process of steps and how we can efficiently catch up. So we're going to try to develop the information. We're going to come back and build our 10-year plan. We're going to identify the school boundaries. We're going to have to consider the elements that we all don't like, which are portable classrooms. The easy answer towards next year, if you need another kindergarten classroom, is we might end up with another portable. And that might be our only answer for something like Summit View, for a 1 or a 2-year or 3-year process. Because getting bonds passed through, I think, is going to be difficult. Okay.
I think there's another issue too, as far as the general public. Because we're all going to see our taxes go up because of the state school levy. People do not understand that funding mechanism. It'll be real hard to get positive messages out there when you've already got your taxes going up for the state school levy. And I think that's something that we really need to think about. I'm also pondering a discussion that we had where we talked about, do we identify ourselves as community schools or neighborhood schools? Because when you have that discussion about elementary school boundaries and changing school boundaries, you can bet that's going to factor into what people think. And then to address your point, which I thought was a really aha kind of light bulb for me, people come to school board meetings when it's personal. So the key is, how do you personalize the message to get everybody in your community on board? And I think that's what we have to look at. And when I started thinking about all the great resources that you've provided to us, when each of us went out and did our audit of the individual building sites, I don't know that we fully addressed the questions when we came back as a group. Because in my way of thinking, when we reviewed our buildings, yeah, what were the issues that we found? And then kind of to address what you were getting at, are these issues something that could be addressed by maintenance, or do they require replacement? I don't know that we really prioritized that when we came back with everybody's summary reports. So to me, if I had to sit here and say, okay, so which building represented the greatest potential to address our student enrollment issues and the building condition, I honestly could say right now, I couldn't tell you from our discussions. So for me, there's a lot of unanswered questions just in our process of, okay, we did all this great work, we've got all of these great data sources, how do we address the answers to some of those questions? And then how do we move forward? Because I think it's great to get all this information, but then are we utilizing that information in an effective way as a group? And I know a lot of us weren't here, you know, people came and went, but I think somehow we need to maybe take a step and think about what did we get from all the work that we've done so far. Did I make myself clear, or did I confuse everybody? I don't know if that's helpful.
So do you want to go back to your school and?
No, I'd like to see us kind of revisit, you know, this, where everybody went. I mean, we had all those great reports. And I even remember people thinking, gosh, it'd be great if we could, at some of the school board meetings, even highlight the findings from those reports so that the public understood the kinds of things we discovered and saw. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but I just think that we need to answer those questions, you know. It would get to your issue about maintenance and building replacement. And the other thing that came out when we did the walk around with the posters and we were trying to identify priorities is making sure that we're all using the same terms. Because I think you raised a great point. You know, when you talk about overcrowded classrooms, you better define your terms. What do you mean by overcrowded classrooms? It's not just the student-teacher ratio. It's not just the square footage. And then we also had the question about what's the best configuration for effective learning to occur. Do we keep the K-4 model? Do we do the middle school 5-6? Do we do the junior high 7-8? Do we have a freshman campus? I mean, these are all questions that we've been wrestling with. So I'd kind of like us to kind of maybe get back to some of those things. Because I keep hearing us go back to the failed bond and why the bond failed and what's going to be the new message, but I think there's other issues that we need to answer before we can get to that point. That's just my personal opinion.
Robinette, can you help me by trying to write down those questions?
Sure.
I try to keep notes, but they also look kind of scribbling.
Well, I'd like to see us answer what you have on your sheet here. When we did our building reviews, okay, I know that all of us came back. So what issues did we find?
Just really quick, that's meeting number 2.
That was facilities meeting number 3 on the 29th of June. And we came back and I think we're supposed to look at that on July 27th. And I don't know that we had enough people here to really talk about it. But the two things were, are the issues addressed more by maintenance or did they require building replacement? Because we found some common themes, you know, and I think that's when you mentioned that some of the bonds, you know, the monies that were there were really going to be for maintenance versus, you know, building replacement. But then I don't know that we ever answered the question which building represents the greatest potential to address student enrollment and building condition. I know we said that White Hollow had the space to expand because of the configuration, but I don't know. Maybe I think I've been to most of our meetings and I just think that there was some of that missing for me.
Richard's building, if we remove the preschools?
Yeah, we do that, and that would be really easy to add another annex to 6 classrooms.
know that on that sheet, there was some corrections, like I think the estimate for, that was for 590 should have been $6.99 on the, at the top, above the school levy chart. Because there was, in 2016, it was $669, 2017 was $644, 2018, it goes up to $699. I'm not sure where it's going in 2019.
Well, that's worse.
We're not either.
It's gonna be.
Clear at the top there. Yeah.
That's the plot.
Yeah, you changed it up there. Okay, that's not what I have on the sheet, okay. So is it going back down to 590 then, from 699? I wasn't sure if that was correct.
That's our that might not be our understanding anymore. Because at our last school board meeting, Dave Cook, who's our county
Right.
assessor, suggested that Yakima might actually be 280 or 290 as a county, not the 270 number that we were previously suggesting.
Okay.
Am I saying that correct, Mike?
Yeah, nobody really knows, right?
Nobody knows, yeah. I know.
It's not a good situation.
It isn't a good situation. And then here we are trying to sell something that, you know, we don't know anything about. I mean, it's tough.
Absolutely.
Can I ask when, I don't remember the Valley being toured in. I don't remember, was that done in the summer?
Yeah, that was the.
Yes.
I did it poorly. I didn't have anybody else go through it, so Heidi sent me over some photos of that I used.
And I was gonna say, Ryan, I think that's one of the things that maybe we missed on those buildings. I mean, it was in the summer, so
Absolutely.
many of us weren't there. Most of us weren't there.
I think that
But
that's
that
what
would have been nice to have a committee member hear from the staff members of, here's what we think is going on in our building. Rather than walking around by ourselves or with a janitor or principal or,
Well, I don't know, I had a great response, because I went to
We went to a
Montana,
Canada, that's
and
just-
I talked to staff, I talked to the principal, I talked to everybody.
I think the hard question that I have with the staff element is kind of back to this misinformation perspective. You know, the teacher you ask, well, how's your room for comfort and temperature? And, you know, somebody's answer is always, it's always too hot or it's always too cold. And that is an unfair understanding about the building in general.
or maybe not.
Well, but there was another comment, and Pat went to the junior high, and I'm gonna get this a little bit wrong, but
I'll correct you.
the comment was, we change the filters when we change our clocks. Something like that. I don't remember exactly what.
Yeah, it was between, the way it was explained by the staff, the janitorial staff, was that they, at daylight savings time, which is, I guess, in October, that's when they start changing all the filters, and it's not a quickie thing like in your house. There's one area, it takes them all day, because there's like 50 or 90-some filters in there. And then in the spring, they changed them again. Well, I was told then by Tim was challenged me on it, and I said, hey, I'm just repeating what the staff told me they do. I'm not there doing it.
So that's the challenge is, Tim came back and I touched base with him a couple of days later, and he says, I don't know where that information comes from because we change them on a quarterly basis during school operations. So there's never, before that he could ever remember, been this comparative between when we change our clocks, we change our filters. Now, again, it comes back to where we look for the source of information. And it does come back to not wanting to place an unreasonable burden on people like Tim and Tim's facility staff who already have a lot of building square footage to take care of because they understand the kind of hardscape of the building better than anybody else. And then from an education and from a building use and function, the kind of grouping of staff do a better job of understanding it. So
Yeah.
it just comes back to where we're getting the information.
Well, and I guess I would argue that point, Tim oversees 10 buildings. Those janitors know when they change the filters.
I don't think the janitors change the filter.
They don't, it's facilities.
It's the HVAC guys.
My point about the,
Sorry.
when you're doing the visitations or whatever,
Right.
or pictures or whatever, is it makes more sense to see it when it's in student use than it does when we've stacked and ordered everything for the summer, et cetera. It just has a completely different.
You should come right now while we're having to do indoor recess.
Yeah.
Hey, it helps, I use it help.
Yeah.
So at some point, I think it does provide us benefit to go back and see how the buildings are operating, and perhaps this is the time that we should do that. Because, you know, I have no doubt that we missed building use by being there this summer, but it just wouldn't want to fit our schedule, so. Okay,
What, can you remind us of the timeline again? When is that proposal needing to be shared with the school board?
today.
Oh,
Yeah, no, we're supposed to, we're a month or two behind,
oh, okay.
so, yeah. Really? So yeah, we need to, I need to pick up some ground, and, you know, part of that again is to get some of the information that I've just now asked for from the district, and part of it is to figure out how, whether or not in district we actually have the capability to do a lot of the kind of mapping elements that are helpful to us. We may or may not have the tools, and we may or may not have the skills in order to do that, so we just need to figure out how to get over that bump. And I still don't know if Deb's found any boundary maps of previous elementary school boundaries. So she was looking.
How far back do you want to go?
But if you've got them, we had a board member asked to go back to as early as we can get.
You could go to the website.
So I think I've got one from the 2008 rebound. I got one of those stuff in the corner. I'll look.
Yeah, anything we can do, and then which obviously we need to get it into the mapping software. Okay. Any questions? We're up against 7 o'clock. We're gonna try to get out of time.
That house is good, so I gotta be leaving.
Just for clarification, so, sorry, as far as the survey results and the information, what's going to be done with the rest of, I mean, with all of the comments and responses? What are the plans for that?
My intent, I'll go back, and Stephen can give me some suggestions on other things to maybe eliminate, but my intent, so this survey belongs to Citizens for Better Schools, and our intent is to fully post it.
Okay.
So unless you guys all have disagreements, and we shouldn't do that, if you disagree with that initial thought, and we shouldn't do that, absolutely willing to hear that, otherwise the intent was to get it out there and get it used.
Ryan, I guess, I don't know what I missed, so I'm sorry I was late, I had some business I couldn't get out of, but one of the most telling things when I went through the data here, you know, if you look at that, I think it's 10 or 14, how do you feel the West Valley property taxes compared to the needs of the district?
Question 10.
Question 10, yeah, I thought that was pretty telling, because, you know, I was out there, you know, going out door to door, and I had a chance to talk to some of the folks in that scenario, and, you know, it was mixed, because kind of what it reflects here. Half were saying it was too high, half said they were unsure. And if you notice that they say just about right is kind of a little bit higher, it kind of implies to me between the too high and just about right that they think we're where we should be. And I think the message, we're just not finding a right way to get the message out there in terms of the actual tax. That unsure category, that's larger than I would have expected that to be. And especially when I read some of the comments that people made, you know, there were some interesting comments about communication in general, which surprised me. But I think this one's especially telling, at least for me, somebody who worked with that group and trying to get that message out. So I don't know, how do we convince people that they really aren't high? And, you know, we've talked about numbers with that, what that tax amount is, what it should be. But I don't know, I just think we're not convincing them yet. And something, whatever we come out of this, it's gotta point to something. And, you know, I'm a big results person. It's gotta point to something that's going to attack, especially that unsure group, but it's also gotta hit that group that thinks they're too high, you know, and this might be the way to do it. It's just that we gotta shape the results to get that message out a little better.
So I'm just curious, by show of hands, who has a general understanding on their own home, what they pay for state and local taxes?
General. General.
So, and by general, I mean you have a general idea that it's more than 1,000 and less than 3 in a year. You have a general idea, or 3 to 5. Okay. So, you know, your property taxes are based off whatever the assessed value is that you get in February of the year. It says, hey, look, your $200,000 home is worth now $225,000. Okay. That change in your property, your assessed value, doesn't mean you're paying more taxes. In fact, if everybody's house went up by the same percentage, it means you're all paying essentially exactly the same. You're paying a lower rate on the slightly higher valuation, but you're all paying the same. So I throw that out there because
Okay, give you a quick example. On that last defeated bond issue, it said on the flyer, it would increase your property taxes by so many dollars per hundred.
$1,000.
No, it said $1 per $100 or something. Anyway, I did a quick calculation on mine. That was almost a $1,500 a year increase in my taxes. Do you wonder why I said no? That was almost a quarter increase in my overall taxes.
Well, the requested rate was $1.58 per thousand, I believe. So that may have been worth. Right now, today, you're paying about $6.44 per thousand. So yes, it would have gone up 20%.
Yeah. For a retired person to have roughly a $1,500, a little bit less than that, $100 a year jump. And however many other retired, I've got my wife's aunt is 84. First time in her life, she voted no for it. She saw what happened to her taxes.
And Pat, I don't need an answer to this, but
No, I'm just saying, this
intuitively,
is what you're looking at with a retired person.
absolutely,
That's
but
a huge increase.
intuitively, the question that somehow we need to answer is, well, would $750 of impact been okay? Or would $500 of impact been okay? Or was zero the answer? So again, I don't want and I don't need the answer right now. That's the question that ultimately we have to demonstrate as to how we're utilizing levy and bond dollars efficiently and appropriately in order to meet the reasonable need in our district, not to meet the shiny gold faucets in Trump Tower, but to meet the effective student learning environments. So that's the balance we have. That's how we address it.
I understand that, but I keep trying to point out to you, you have to understand the other aspect from a lot of people when they suddenly see a major increase in their taxes. And I'm talking major increase. 20% is a big increase in your annual taxes.
I'm seeing that in the information that was mailed out, I was seeing $1.58 per thousand of assessed valuation.
Okay, so $1.58 per thousand, take that, say, most of the new houses like you're on, that's say times 400,000.
Sure, you just said 400.
Okay, say 450, whatever.
That's
Okay.
Anyway, I have to go back and see what I wrote down on my end.
Any other questions? I'm gonna go ahead and send out a note for the 21st of September, that's 2 weeks off. So I'm gonna put it on a calendar. I may or may not have a bigger, more important meeting that I actually get paid to attend. So I'll just let you know that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ryan.